So what is the process after someone is arrested and they're out of jail? Someone you know has been arrested, a bond has been set, they paid that bond, which allows them to get out of jail. So what do you do next? This is why it's important to hire an attorney early on. Just because a police department has arrested you or someone you know does not mean that you're eventually going to be charged with a crime. The police at that point will make a charging decision. They would say, okay, this person has been arrested by this officer. A lot of time it's a detective that's reading a police report from an officer on the street. The detective reads it. They decide whether it's a good case or not. If they think it's a good case, meaning they think they can prove the elements of whatever offense it is, so say DWI assault, they think if they give it to a prosecutor can actually get a conviction on a case. If they think that it's a possibility, then they will submit those charges to the DA. And in Dallas County, it's the Dallas DA. In Tarrant County, it's the criminal DA. They're just known by different names. But regardless, they both have intake attorneys. Those intake attorneys will take those police reports, and at that point, they'll decide whether or not to accept the case or reject the case. If they accept the case and it's a misdemeanor, so it's a Class A, Class B, or Class C misdemeanor, and they accept it, then they file what's called an information. An information is just a piece of paper that charges you with a misdemeanor. If it's a felony case, the process is different. Let's start over. The police arrest you for a felony offense. They think they have enough, or a prosecutor could win the case or could prove the case against you and they could convict you. So they submit those charges to the DA. Another intake attorney at the DA's office reviews the felony case, they accept it. But unlike the misdemeanor, there still has to be one more step before you're charged with the crime. It has to go to a grand jury. A grand jury in felony cases is a secretive process or an investigative process. That means that your hired defense attorney has no right to go in there and argue that you should not be indicted by a grand jury or charged by a grand jury, because it's still part of the investigation process. And the way that it works is this: a prosecutor will go in, usually with a police report in hand or a summary of the police report. They'll present it to a grand jury. A grand jury consists of 12 people from the community. And if 9 of those 12 people thinks there's probable cause, the same standard the police used to arrest a person, if none of those 12 people think there's probable cause that this crime was committed or this felony was committed, you will be indicted or officially charged with a felony. So why is it important to hire an attorney in the very beginning? As we've talked about before, the police are going to make a charge decision. If you hire an attorney before those charges have been submitted to a DA's office, a lot of times we can reach out to the police, maybe submit affidavits to them, just talk to them and try to convince them not to file a case with the DA. Now that doesn't happen very often because sometimes police don't want to speak with us, but at least you can try from the beginning to try to make those charges go away. If the police have already decided to charge you, then the next step that we can take as your attorneys is we can reach out to the DA's office and we can try to talk to them, whether it's a felony or a misdemeanor, and try to convince them to reject the case, to not move forward with the case. Because at that point, it's much easier to get a prosecutor to reject a case, whether it's a misdemeanor or a felony, than after you're already charged. Because once you're charged with either a misdemeanor or a felony, it makes it that much more difficult to get the case dismissed. Because the DA's already made a decision, we're gonna move forward, we wanna prosecute this person, so it becomes more difficult to convince them that there's either not enough evidence or it's not a good case for them to move forward with. Now, the process is different though with misdemeanors and felonies. If we were talking to a prosecutor and trying to get them to reject a misdemeanor case, there's a lot of different things that we can do to convince them to do that. And if we convince them to do that, then they reject the case and it's over. The process for felonies is twofold. We try to do the same thing we do with misdemeanors. We try to convince that prosecutor to reject the case because it's over. If the prosecutor's not agreed to reject the case at that point and takes it to a grand jury, there are some counties in the state of Texas that will allow us to submit information to a grand jury. The reason why that's important is that in a felony case, we want to avoid you getting charged with the case if at all possible. Because once you're charged, once a grand jury decides to charge you or indict you for a crime, it makes it much more difficult at that point to get your case dismissed. If you have any questions about what I talked about today, leave a comment below, or you can visit our website at versestexas.com.